If you are already enjoying the vast array of great features found in Cubase and want to apply your audio skills to different industries like post-production, game audio, or virtual reality, then this video is for you. Here are the top 10 reasons to cross-grade from Cubase to Nuendo. Nuendo 11 comes with an integrated Dolby Atmos renderer and all the tools you need to author, mix, and deliver Dolby Atmos compliant ADM broadcast WAV files. Take your surround mixes to the next level and turn them into fully immersive object-based audio experiences. ADR, also known as Automated Dialogue Replacement, is a key element in films and OTT productions. The ADR taker found in Nuendo turns the voice-over recording process into a streamlined, smooth experience. Automatically start and end a recording based on cycle markers, display dialogue on screen, have total monitoring control with the signal switchboard, and even run a remote session with the ADR functionality found in VST Connect Pro 5.5. Automatically rearrange your audio projects to match picture changes with the integrated reconforming tool. Based on EDL comparison, the reconforming algorithm generates a change list used to resynchronize your audio project to last-minute picture changes. The Field Recorder audio input function allows dialogue editors to find, import, and align original production set recordings that match a selected audio event in the project. This way, editors can easily incorporate the best-sounding audio file into the project for further editing and mixing. Supervision, our professional metering plugin suite, has 3 additional modules that would help you achieve an intelligible dialogue mix, deliver content according to Netflix standards, and translate your mix to be suitable for movie trailers with the LEQM meter. With the loudness track, you can record the loudness of the project, making sure your mix complies with the desired loudness standard. It gives visual feedback whenever the reference level is exceeded and adjustment in the mix is needed. It is also possible to normalize audio files to a specific integrated loudness standard during the audio export process. The video cut detection function allows you to analyze video cuts between shots and to add markers to the detected cut positions. This can be useful for editing the audio according to the cuts of a video in case no edit decision list is available. Game Audio Connect dramatically speeds up the process of transferring your musical compositions and audio assets into game audio middlewares. The Rename Events from List feature helps you comply with specific name conventions, renaming all the desired audio files in just one go. And to make sure everybody is on the same page, Perforce version control system is supported. Nuendo comes with exclusive plugins for sound design and surround sound. It also features thousands of royalty-free audio files specifically made for films and game audio, ready to be incorporated into your productions. And in case additional sound effects are needed, Soundly is directly integrated into Nuendo, making it easy to find and import sound effects from the massive Soundly cloud into your project. Nuendo supports DRVR's Spatial Connect, an intuitive way of mixing spatial audio in virtual reality. Take your ambisonic mixing to the next level and create ultra-realistic acoustic environments with enhanced perception of direction and distance. Whether you're working in post-production, games, immersive audio, or virtual reality, Nuendo offers creative freedom to integrate your audio skills into many different exciting industries.
Has it been a month? A month and a day, actually, because we're not here on a Wednesday, we're here on a Thursday. Welcome to Steinberg Sessions. Thank you for following us to this new night. We got JG in the chat over here, so fill the feed with questions as always, and she'll make sure we get to them. Thanks for coming. All you crazy people have been asking me for months to talk about not only sort of the plugins and the mixing and sort of the back part of the process, but you've been asking me to talk about the front part of the process as well. So that's what we're going to start doing tonight. I thought we were going to take care of it in one night, the whole thing. And then I went and I planned the session, and it was going to be about 9 hours long. So I thought maybe we should break it up. So tonight we're going to do part one. It's all about guitars. But before we get to that, I just want to remind you, for those that are just joining us, please head on over to Yamaha Canada Solutions on Facebook. That's where I post about everything that's happening with this group. So pretty excited about it. And something else that's pretty exciting is this brand new thing that we're going to debut starting Thursday, July 8th. So Steinberg Sessions happens the last Thursday in the month, and Yamaha 440 sessions will happen on the second Thursday of every month. Why would you Steinberg Sessions folks want to join in on that? Because the idea is for us to sort of bring all the worlds together. As you know, Yamaha owns Steinberg, and so we kind of focus on Steinberg and recording things in this workshop, and occasionally Yamaha things show up. There might be a couple behind me. We might play a couple tonight. But we make it about Steinberg. The other one, we're going to make it about Yamaha instruments and Yamaha topics, but we're going to try to bring the Steinberg thing together with it. So there's reason for you to be at both. The first one, Thursday, July 8th at 7 p.m., we're going to talk about the Montage keyboard and the Modi X keyboard, our two Pro series of keyboards, but we're going to talk about how they integrate into the world of Cubase and how we might use them back and forth together. And we're going to have an interview, well, maybe two interviews. It's going to be pretty awesome. So instead of just talking to producers like we do here, which in and of itself, if that's all we did, would be phenomenal. But we're also going to talk to some musicians and some folks behind the scenes that are making music for real and making their living doing it and putting out records that you hear on the radio. And none of it's going to be super technical. We're going to make it all about real, live, making music. Speaking of, we have a special guest tonight. You've heard her sing. I don't know how many of you knew that she played guitar, but my daughter Siobhan is with us this evening, and she will be helping us out by doing a little jangling on the guitar over there. Hi, Siobhan. There she is. Okay, so she's played for big stages and for like 1,000 people at a time. But all you experts out there in Steinberg land, this is super stressful. I'm stressed out for her. She's not. She's cool as a cucumber, isn't that right, Siobhan? Okay. All right. So tonight, we're going to talk about something that I'm pretty sure pretty much all of you at some point or another either have done, are doing, or are going to do. And that is recording guitars and other stringed instruments, bass, all those things. We're going to kind of cover it all. And, I thought this would be kind of a small topic, but with all the technology that we have these days, this has become quite a big topic. So that's what we're going to do tonight. And then next time we're going to get to, you guys had questions about, like setting tempo and recording keyboards and levels and all kinds of other sort of issues related to all the front end things, some monitoring things using DSP mix effects. That we're going to do next month. As I say, it was just going to be too long. And the truth is we have so many microphones and cameras and things all set up in here that I don't think we could set anything else up. So here's Siobhan, and here's the mics on Siobhan's guitar, and here's my fancy schmancy rack that's right behind me, and here I am again. So many things. There's so many things happening tonight. Anyway, without further ado, let's get into it. So we're going to start with acoustic. And acoustic, this kind of relates to mandolin and banjo and all those things. So, whatever, it could even relate to like violins and other stringed instruments like that as well. The ideas that we're presenting here will work on those things as well. We're going to use an acoustic guitar tonight. It happens to be, actually it's this way, that one right there. That's a Yamaha A3R. I've had it in my possession for a little bit, and it's a beautiful guitar, and I think you'll hear that when we record. Now, how do we record guitar? Well, most guitars these days have a pickup, and you can certainly run it directly in. That's certainly a fine way to record it, but I don't think that's the kind of sound, generally speaking, when we're talking about acoustic guitar that we're going to hear on records for the most part. Certainly there are some that have that sound and they've employed it quite effectively, but for the most part, in most of the work at least I do, I want to hear the sound of an acoustic guitar recorded with microphones. So, what kind of microphones? Any microphone will work, but I have a particular fondness actually for these ones that are up here right now. You can see them right there. That's an Audix SCX25A, and there's two. Siobhan, if you could point to where the first one is, it's right where the neck and the body meet, so that's where it's aiming. It's aiming for right there. It's about 6 inches back. And then the other one, which is kind of at the other end of the guitar, it's kind of pointing down below the bridge, kind of in the body. Now, there's a million places that you can choose to place the mics. Those are my two favorites, and I think you'll hear why. If you're only going to use the one, I would suggest using the one where the neck and the body meet, because that one sounds great. But with the two, I find if I double, I can use one or the other. Sometimes when I blend them together, I get a really nice sound. The other thing I've done is I've put one over sort of at the player's perspective, pointing down at the guitar, so it sort of hears the guitar the way that the ear hears it, and that's kind of an interesting one to play with. That one works if you have a really good room. I don't recommend using that if you're not in a great room, but certainly that's something to check out as well. But the bottom line with all these things is use your ears. Move the mic around until it sounds good to you. That's the most important thing you can do. Now, these microphones are large diaphragm condensers. They look like lollipops. We call them lollipop microphones. And when I've done records, the string players fight over them because I only have two, and sometimes there's more instruments than that, and the string players always want to use them on their instrument. So I probably should get more. Large diaphragm condensers are wonderful for stringed instruments, but also small diaphragm condensers. I don't have one in front of me, but those little pencil, they look like little pencil condensers. Those things are pretty great too. What's the difference? Well, a large diaphragm condenser will give you a bigger, fuller, richer sound. The small diaphragm condensers, if you have a really boomy guitar or you're doing something like a cello or an upright bass and you're just having problems with too much low end, then a small diaphragm condenser sometimes can do it. Or if you want a very focused acoustic guitar sound, then a small diaphragm condenser will work really well for that as well. Now, we'll get it out of the way right at the beginning. Everyone's going to wonder, new strings, old strings, does that matter? Do I need to get my guitar set up by a professional before each session? I love new strings, but sometimes old strings kind of have a charm, and they usually sound the best. They're going to sound right before one breaks. So if you've got a great sound happening, chances are that string will break pretty soon. But for most of the sessions I usually put fresh strings on, although, you needn't be excessive about that. It's not absolutely necessary. Essentially, the idea here is to have a good instrument, a good player, place the mics in a place that sounds good, and capture whatever's coming out of that instrument as well as you can. So don't worry too much about new strings, and as evidenced by the fact that every single guitar that Siobhan is going to play for us tonight has really old strings, so nothing to worry about there. Guitar setups are a different thing, and I would suggest that it's something that you don't need to do every single session. And when I say setup, for those of you that don't understand, I'm talking about when you adjust the intonation and get the string heights adjusted and sort of make the guitar as playable, the best playability that it could have. I used to do it when I had lots of money and not so many guitars. I used to do it before every session, and it was wonderful because the guitars, they all played like butter, and they were sounded great, and the intonation was fantastic anywhere on the neck that you played, and it was great. But then when I had 25 guitars, that got really expensive, and my budgets couldn't really support how much setting up I was doing. So I recommend doing it in the season changes, because generally speaking, anything that's made of wood kind of takes a bit of a beating every time we change from winter to summer and those kinds of things. So set up your guitars. That's a really good thing. Even better, learn how to set up guitars yourself, because you'll save a whole pile of money and you'll be able to customize them exactly to how you like to use it. And when we're talking about electric guitars, you know, there's a lot of stuff on the internet about the guitar cables that you use. Now, I don't, this is a big topic. We're not going to spend too much time on it here. I've certainly geeked out on this myself, and I can tell you that there is a difference between certain cables. Some cables sound better than other cables, or, you know, even if it's not better, they're certainly a little bit different. I can certainly hear a difference between cables. Again, using a poorer cable or a cheaper cable, in my opinion, is not a reason to recut all the guitars on your record just because you didn't use a really high quality expensive cable. Again, this falls under the use what you have, make it sound great, and finish your song, because that's way more important than the guitar cable you're using. But buy the best cables that you can, because they do make a difference. They certainly are more reliable and they last longer. And sometimes, you know, they prevent you from getting weird buzzes and hums and things that you don't know where they come from. Guitars are particularly prone to all these kind of extraneous noises. Tuning. Let's talk about tuning. Tune, please tune before every take when you're recording. I know it's a pain in the rear, and I know it takes a lot of time, but we're all going to listen to your song for many, many years to come. And that extra 30 seconds, 60 seconds it took to check the tuning on your guitar will pay dividends 20 years down the road when you have to hear that same guitar that's just a little bit out of tune over and over again. So please tune your guitars, and I recommend tuning them after you stop every time, or at least every couple of times, every you know, say every 5 minutes, just check it. Because you know, the tuning on a guitar will change just in your hands from the temperature of your hands, and so, you know, you want to make sure that things are in tune. And certainly a good setup will help with the intonation, whether you're playing sort of lower on the neck or higher up on the neck. That, you know, that will help with that as well. Okay, how many mics? We're going to use 2 on this, but as you know, and we've talked about this before, anytime we use more than one mic, we have to worry about phase relationships between the microphones. And so we're going to dig into that in Cubase in a few minutes. But just be aware that when you record with 2 microphones, they have to be placed in such a way that you get your sound in phase. And what that means is that when the waveform goes up on one mic, the waveform goes up on the other mic. And when the waveform goes down on the first mic, the waveform goes down on the second mic. Now, it's not very often that we get these perfectly in phase, and we have tools to help us with that. But you want to get things as close to in phase as possible. And there's something called the 3 to 1 rule. So we have a source, and we place a mic. Let's say we've placed that mic. Here, I have a mic. Let's place the mic. Here's the source. Here's the mic. We've placed it. We're pointing the microphone at the source. And this is about 3 inches here. So the 3-to-1 rule says that the other mic has to be exactly 3 inches from the source as well. So if I have a second mic, it's here. They're together 3 inches from the source. Or if they're not picking up the sound at the same time, then that has to be 3 times the distance. So mic number 1 can be 3 inches from the source. For those that are good at math, what that means is that mic number 2 has to be 3, 6, 9 inches from the source. So mic 1 can be 3, mic 2 can be 9 inches. So if you want to have your mics spread out and capturing more of the room and different aspects of it, keep in mind the 3-to-1 rule. It really does work. Anything in between 3-to-1 and you will have some phase cancellation that you'll have to deal with. But again, we have tools to fix that. So just something to keep in mind whenever you're using more than one mic. And you can imagine when you get into situations like miking drums and having multiple microphones that having all those mics and thinking about the 3-to-1 rule could drive you a little bit crazy. But anyway, so something to keep in mind, and I can answer questions about that later if you'd like. Okay, I think we're kind of ready to maybe record some guitar. Do we got a thumbs up here from Siobhan? We have a thumbs up from Siobhan. Okay, so we've got the 2 SCX 25s. I'm going to mute my mic and I'm going to put this in record, and we're going to take a look at the levels because the levels are really, really important. Now, I aim, before we do that, there's one more little theoretical issue here. We've been recording at all kinds of crazy different levels, and I'm not going to go too nuts with the theory behind this, but when in the early days of digital, everybody recorded really, really loudly, like right up to the top, like to 0 dB full scale. That's where we were aiming. And the thought behind that was the only place in those early days, well, the only place in all the days, but the only place where we get the full bit representation of our sound. So, we record at 16 or 24 bit. The only way we get all 16 or 24 bits is if we're at 0 dB full scale. As the level drops, 23 bits, 22 bits, 21 bits, 20 bits. And if it gets really quiet, we could end up with an 8-bit recording. Now, for those of you that have played 8-bit video games, you know what that sounds like. It doesn't sound very good. So we were all afraid if we didn't crank the level up all the way to 0 dB, and in those days it was 16-bit recording, we wanted to get the full resolution of that 16-bit. The problem was this. If you have a whole bunch of tracks that are all full scale, like right up at the top, what's going to happen on your mix bus? Like when you go to the mix, it's going to be overloaded. The other problem was that all of our plugins to this day, but especially in the early days, because we had just come from analog equipment, they were all kind of designed to have input levels kind of like the analog equipment that they were emulating. And so we would take this 0 dB full scale, but the analog equivalent, that's about 12 dB above 0. And for those of you that were around in the analog days, we used to try to make the needle hit 0. That was the thing. Different 0 though. The analog 0, the VU 0 was different than the decibel full scale 0. And the digital one that's in here is about 12 dBs too loud. So guess what happens when we take a full scale recording and we put it into a plugin that wants it to be like an analog 0 or 0 VU? Distortion. And so we either had to be turning files up and down on the input, or we were running them into the plugin, and we were getting all this kind of crazy distortion kind of stuff, and it wasn't sounding good. It's bad, really bad. So especially when 24-bit happened, we realized that, well, we should probably aim for our recording to be around the level of 0 VU, or analog 0, which is around minus 12, 0 decibel full scale. And we're not overly worried about that because we still have enough bits represented that the sound is really good. And the thing is, when we're not turning things up and down, every time we turn things up or down or process them, on our file we're doing a whole bunch of math, and that degrades the sound. So we figured out, let's just kind of get it at the right place to start, not do too much math, and then our sound quality by the time it gets to the 2 mix is going to be a heck of a lot better. And that's exactly how we do it. So when we set up the levels here, I'm aiming for minus 12 decibel full scale. It's about 2/3 of the way up the scale. Okay, so I'm going to mute this mic. And we've got Siobhan, me with a bunch of delay. So let's take a look at the levels here. Okay, can you play, Siobhan?
Yeah.
Okay, so as we can see, that level was pretty good. And let's go back over here, and I'm going to show you, this is a pretty cool thing that's happening. Again, let's take a quick look at my rack here. So many screens, so many cameras. Okay, here we go. Let's take a look at the rack. As you can see, I've got, well, let's do the tour right now while we're here. So this is the wireless I'm talking through, the Line 6. I've got a UR24C I'm testing out, Steinberg. But my APIs, the pre's and the EQs, here's my AXR4, which is just amazing. And we're bypassing all my outboard stuff tonight. We're just going straight into the AXR4 because I love the sound of these pre's so much. I have a Crane Song Tracker here. I have a Joe Meek SC 2.2, and then I've got a headphone box out here. But for a studio the size of mine, that's really about all that I need to do most things, because I'm normally only recording a couple of mics at a time, and if I need more, obviously the AXR4 has 4 inputs on it, so good to go with that. I've got lots of inputs and certainly enough for everything that I need to do. So let's go back to here. And I want to show you, this is a super cool thing that Steinberg is doing now. So in the inspector here, if I open up the AXR4 panel here, I can turn phantom on and off pad. I can do, you know, high impedance input, and my gain is right here. All the stuff that Tony was asking me about the reverb, using reverb and stuff, it's all right in this panel. I can insert things. That my silk control is here, which is off right now, but we'll come back to it later. So it's really fantastic. So I can adjust my level from here, and I can see it here obviously as well. So pretty darn cool. All right, let's actually record this guitar, and then we can talk some more about this phase relationship stuff. Okay, so muted one mic, and okay, so here we go. We're rolling, Siobhan. Nice. That's the guitar part from one of Siobhan's songs called Escort, which is an amazing song. Okay, so here's our guitar recording. This is the mic that was close to the neck, and this is the one that was down by the bridge. And let's just hear on playback what's going on here. Okay, very cool. Now, there's a couple of things we can do to deal with the phase, and we'll do them in the mixer. But let's actually take a look visually and see what's going on here in terms of phase relationship, because if we zoom in on the waveform really, really close, you can see how this goes up, and this goes up in the same place, and this goes down, and this goes down in the same place. These two tracks are perfectly in phase. We got lucky. They don't always end up that nice. But anyway, if you don't want to look at the track like that and sort of assess that way, if you're in a hurry or that's a little geeky for what you do, here's how we can tell. When we're playing it back, if we go to the top here in the pre-section, we have a phase switch. And essentially what turning that on and off does is whenever the wave was going up, it's now going down. And whenever the wave was going down, it's now going up. It basically just reverses it. And so what will happen is if you've got one going up and one going down, they cancel each other out. So we should get weird kind of sounds happening. So an easy test here is just to play it back and just flip the phase on and off and see if you can hear the difference. Now, I mean, I don't know how obvious, this is a subtle thing, and I think you should be able to hear it over the internet, but I would encourage you to try it yourself, just to see how it actually sounds in real life. And there's no right or wrong here. You can basically flip the phase, or reverse the polarity as it's also called, and you can just decide which you think sounds better and go with that. So let's have a listen to this guitar part again, and I'm going to flip the phase. So this is how it was recorded. Flipped, back. Flipped, and back. Now, I think that's going to be pretty obvious over the internet, because it was so in phase when I flipped it. Then what happened was it made it completely out of phase, so that you can hear, and you can hear the cancellation. Now, what happens if it's in phase and I flip both of them? Well, essentially what I've done is taken all the up waveforms and made them down. So if they were working together in the first place and you flip them both, they're still going to be working together, but in the opposite direction. Is there an occasion where you might want to do that, to flip the phase even though they're in phase? Absolutely there is. And the time when that is when you hear something weird happening in your mix, where perhaps another instrument is somehow competing and you can't figure out, it's like, oh, there's like a weird canceling thing happening every time I bring in that keyboard part, it makes my guitar go away. Try flipping the phase on both tracks, and you may find that there was some phase, some frequency cancellation happening between two completely different instruments, which can happen. And certainly when you get a drum recording where you have a whole pile of mics happening, flipping the phase, looking for the strongest sound is always a good thing. So let's hear that again. I'm going to put it back, we'll play it again, and I won't speak over it, I'm just going to play it now. You'll be able to see it flip in and out, and you can hear the difference. Pretty cool. I'm sure there's some of you that didn't even weren't even aware that button was there. Now, there is also on a number of plugins, there is also a phase switch on a number of plugins that are available. And you may be able to see it. It's right there. It's that thing right there. That sort of a circle with a line through it. That will also flip the phase, and you'll find it on a lot of EQ plugins and a whole bunch of things. So certainly something to look for if you can't find it in the mixer here. Now I want to give a shout out here. Universal Audio has some amazing plugins, and we're going to talk a lot about them tonight, but we're going to talk about this one in particular because it's especially cool. It's this one right here. It's the Little Labs IBP. And essentially what this is for this purpose. It's to help us adjust the phase because, again, we got pretty lucky. They lined up pretty well. That mic placement was pretty good. But sometimes things are a little bit out of phase, but not completely out of phase. And so what some people do is they actually get into the waveform and they start sliding the track around. But that's always a little tricky because if you do too much of that, you'll find that your track is out of sync with the rest of the band, and that's no good. So what this plugin does is it allows us to actually, this delay adjust actually allows us to kind of slide the track around digitally and change our phase relationship, but in a smaller increment than actually just flipping it 180 degrees. It's pretty cool. And then this one is a phase adjustment tool, which just adjusts the phase relationship in comparison to how the other one is. So let's play it, and this is only on, again, on one track. It's on the second track. And let's actually have a listen to what that's doing. So you can hear it kind of getting phasey as I slide it around, and same thing over here. So it's a very, very cool tool that allows you to sort of subtly adjust things if you don't want to do 180, and you can do that here too. It has a button that allows you to completely flip the phase as well. So, but again, a really nice plugin from Universal Audio. Okay. You probably want to hear these tracks, just what they sound like on their own. So here's the neck mic. This is just the one mic on its own. So as I say, if you're only going to use one, that one's pretty nice. Okay, and then over on this side is the one on the bridge. And it's got sort of a bigger low end to it, but a little bit crispier high end, which is sort of nice. And so if you do 2 takes and you only have one mic, it's actually nice to kind of, you get a really nice, if you pan them hard, you get a really nice wide sound. But I still think they sound best together, so here they are together. Okay, amazing. So, we're going to get into electric. If you have any questions about any of this stuff on the acoustic guitar side, let's hit the feed, and if I don't see it, JG will get it to me. We're just going to show you a little quick, we've got a couple of quick videos to sort of play for you that are related to what we're talking about here, but it allows us to reset without you guys having to watch us. So, we're going to get into electric guitar, but in the meantime, here's a little video for you to enjoy.
When you're recording through an amp and you're going back to get those real tones from your amp and get them into your DAW, obviously you need to have yourself a decent amp, and a decent guitar is a really good start to building and pulling a good tone. Then from there you get into where do I place my microphones. So straight away the sound that I was after with this is a classic sort of Gibson Marshall type tone. A really nice attack, a lot of attack and a lot of very direct sort of sound that I've got with these two instruments here. So the next thing I want to do is make sure that I can keep that harshness and direct sound, not harshness, but that really direct trebly sound, but at the same time get it to sort of bellow out a little bit so I get that lovely bottom end. And get that nice shoulder into the sound, those low mids there, without them being messy. So the way we do that generally is where we place our microphones. Obviously after we've pulled the sound out of the amp that we're happy with, this one I'm quite happy through the 900 here, the JCM 900. Sort of hard to go wrong with that amp and this guitar. You'll pull a great sound straight away, and very much a rock heavy type of tone. The mics that we've got today on the Marshall cabinet are two of my favourite type of mics to use. The first one is an SM57. That's, in fact, if I only had one mic, that would be the mic I'd choose. Fantastic sounding microphone. Really captures the girth and the lovely low fineness of the guitar, which is, in my mind, something that can be easily lost with modern technology. So we're capturing that really organic rock guitar tone with a Gibson, a Marshall and a 57. So plenty of gain there, plenty of bite, but also very articulate with its sound. Now I'm also using a U87 condenser mic here as well, and the reason I'm using that is it actually gives me a lovely sense of depth with the sound, or the ability to blend that sound, the very bright UA87, with the 57, the SM57. Having the two mics allows me to blend the tone and get an even broader and more dynamic range. So I'll show you with the using the 57. If we move it around the speaker cone, we can get some really interesting sounds. And it's also a really nice demonstration into mic placement. Like I said, I like putting the 57 off axis towards the edge of the cone, and that gives me that lovely round, thick tone. It's very tight and very tidy. So for chords, a lot of power chord playing and open chord playing, there's a lot of clarity there. And a lot of bottom end as well. When we're a little bit closer to the center of the cone or the heart of the speaker, we get a very bright, sizzly sort of sound, which is, again, really nice, but we lose a little bit of bottom end there. And as we move across the speaker cone, have a listen to how the phase changes and how the EQ changes of the sound. So you hear we're right in the heart of the cone there, and it's really sizzly and really bright. So we'll continue to move across the cone. You can hear how it changes even further. it's ended up there on the edge of the cone is actually probably where I like to have it the most when I'm using this two microphone setup. When I only use 157, I'll have it a little bit closer to the heart of the speaker, so it gives me the clarity that I need. So now we're going to have a listen to the U87. You'll be able to hear how it's almost more of a high fidelity sounding mic, if there's such a thing. Really, really bright, getting really heaps of tops and heaps of clarity out of the speaker. And as you can see, it's pointing right at the heart of the speaker cone there. So it offsets that really dark 57 placement. Lots and lots of sizzle, lots and lots of tops in that sound. Really beautiful sound, and you'll be able to hear shortly that when we blend the two together, we get a really, really broad but a really wide sort of sounding guitar, distorted guitar sound, but still has plenty of focus as well.
And we're back. Pretty big reset there. Anyway, thanks for sticking around. Some really interesting things in that video to talk about. One of them being that you can have one person sort of stand and move the mic until you find the sweet spot, while the other person plays and then another person listens or whatever. I was always working alone, so I had to do all that experimentation on my own time. I didn't have an assistant always to move things around for me, so I didn't have that luxury. So I had to just kind of figure out the places where I like it, but certainly that's an amazing way to do it. What have we got? We've got now the guitar amp mic'd up. Now, we'll come back to that in a second. Microphones. I like two, again. I like two for most things. It gives me a couple of different colors that I can blend and I can work with, and I really like the pair of mic thing. That works for me on almost everything. So, what kind of mics? Well, many of you probably own this one, the venerable SM57, and a 58. And for those of you that don't know this, if you take this ball head off of an SM58, guess what you see inside? Look, they look an awful lot alike. So basically an SM58, or in this case a Beta 58, is a Beta 57 or an SM57. It just has this ball with, there's foam in here, which it's mostly used for vocals, it's kind of like a SM57 with a pop filter. So for those of you that didn't know that, there's some trivia for you. And in a pinch, if you're lacking an SM57 and you've got a couple of these kicking around, you can use it as interchangeable. I like this mic a lot on guitar, electric guitars. I like it on snare drum too. It's an Audix i5. Many of you have probably seen one of these before. Sennheiser 421, pretty amazing, used on all kinds of things. Great on bass, great on guitar, great on kick drum, great on toms, great on all kinds of things. And while we're talking about bass, we're not going to play a bass tonight because the concepts are the same. But this is my favorite bass cabinet microphone. It's an Audix D4. And, you know, I make jokes with everybody that knows me about bass, in that there is only one bass sound in the world that matters. And I actually believe this, and this is not to diss anyone else's taste in bass, but I really honestly believe if you're going to record bass, you have to have an Ampeg bass amp or a head and cabinet. This is the way to do it. This is the sound of rock and roll. This is the only bass sound on the planet, for me anyway, but that's okay. And it just so happens that Yamaha bought Ampeg recently, and so I'm extra happy because I have a vintage one that I've had since the beginning of time, but now I get to play with all these brand new Ampeg things, which are fantastic. So, 2 mics. Which 2 mics? Well, in the video, he liked an SM57, which is a dynamic mic, with a condenser mic. Now, for those that don't know, very quickly, dynamic mics, you know, like an SM57, these things are super tough. They're not very accurate, but you can like hit them with really loud sounds, which is one of the reasons why they sound great on guitars, because you can turn the amp up and it really sounds great. Condenser mics tend to be a little bit more accurate. Not as warm and fuzzy, but just a little more accurate and full sounding. And then there's a third type of microphone, which is called a ribbon microphone. And these are kind of, you know, without getting into too much about them, it's kind of a vintagey sound. And if we go back over here, there is an SM57, which you'll recognize. And there is also a Bayer M260, which is modified by a guy in the United States called Steve Sank. His dad was RCA Ribbons, and he takes all these less expensive ribbons and makes them like RCA ribbons. And so that's a pretty fantastic sounding microphone. And I have a bunch of them, and they live on guitars. So what I tend to do is I tend to pair, I've got a whole collection of really cool dynamic mics, and then I've got a bunch of these ribbon mics that are modified, a whole bunch of different flavors of them, and I tend to pair my really cool dynamic mics with my really cool ribbon mics, and so I have one of each, and that's sort of my approach to recording electric guitars. Again, there's no right and wrong here, but again, when we use 2 mics, we've got to worry about phase. And as you can see, I've got them lined up so that I've tried to make them as exact as possible. They're about 3 inches away from the grill cloth on that cabinet. And I've tried to make it so that they're in exactly the same distance from the speaker. Now, in behind that grill cloth, which is a very thick grill cloth, and for those of you that have struggled to see inside of a cabinet, I recommend that you have a flashlight around, because if you shine a flashlight through the grill, then you will be able to see the speaker inside. And the speaker will look something like this. Now, the dust cap is the center thing in the middle, and then the rest of it is the speaker cone. And as you move the microphone out to the outer edge of the cone, you get a warmer tone. And the closer it is to the dust cap in the center, the brighter the tone. Now, obviously, with me having 2 mics, one is going to be a little bit closer than the other to the center, and it's going to be a little bit brighter. And so this is a thing that I think about when I'm placing them, and I usually decide which one I want to be closer to the center so that it can be the brighter of the microphones. And so I've shown you there in purple Brent's guitar sweet spot. That's where I place the one that is closest to the center, closest to the dust cap. Sometimes I actually aim it right where the dust cap meets this cone. That can be a really nice place too. And then I put the other one right next to it. And again, it's about 3 inches away from the grill. And again, don't even try to look in there unless you have a flashlight. The flashlight won't make it so much easier to see inside there. Okay, and one other thing that we're doing in this recording, which we didn't do in the acoustic, but we could have done it in the acoustic. But one thing that I really do like to do is I like to record electric guitars with a DI as well. So we'll come back to the DI in a second, but I have a DI, a direct tone, going straight into the computer, and then I have the two mics. Now, for the guitar players out there, if you're like some of the folks I've worked with, you freak out when you see a DI and you think, no, he's going to use that terrible direct guitar sound. Don't worry, I have reasons for it, and the reason is not to use the terrible direct guitar sound. They're actually really great reasons. So we have a DI in now, and let's go back to Cubase, and let's take a look at what we've got happening in terms of levels here. All right, so Siobhan, if you wouldn't mind playing a little bit. Okay, so it sounds like it looks like the levels are pretty good. They're in the right place. Now, one of the questions Derek was asking was, are those tracks linked? And yes, as a matter of fact, they were. So how we do that, for those of you that don't know, is we click, select the tracks we want, right click, and then we can link selected tracks, and then we get this dialog box where we can name it. So let's name guitar. And then we can choose all the things that we want to happen on both channels. So if I want the volumes to go up and down, or I want the pans to move together, in this case I don't, because later on I'm going to do some stereo things, so I want to keep those separate. But anything I do with plugins or anything else, or inserts or anything else, it's going to happen on both channels. So I can link as many tracks as I want together and do it that way. And so now they're linked, and you can see that by here. And when I hit record, they both go into record, which is pretty awesome. Now, Derek was saying, I think it was Derek. Yes, he uses a folder track. So if you put these in a folder track, then you hit record on the folder track, you get all the tracks that way. But I tend to, when I'm, especially in the beginning when I'm tracking, I tend to want to do this too, move things up and down together. So this enables me to move levels and things all together. And sometimes I put plugins, and then they'll pop up in both, and that's kind of handy for me. So that's why I group them this way. Tony asked if we're direct monitoring. We are not this evening, Tony, because with the way I had everything routed, it was easier for me to just deal with the latency. So we are not direct monitoring tonight, but we will get into that next week, I promise, or next month, I promise. So, all right, so let's record, and let's see what's going on here. Okay, cool. So as you can see, we were getting up pretty close to, minus 12, where we want to be. That's pretty cool. And I should shout out as well that this pretty amp, and you can see them in behind Siobhan there. I have some custom made amps made by my friend Stephen Kors. He has Trinity amps in Brighton, Ontario. And he does beautiful work, and he makes amazing amps, and they're all pretty low wattage. So like I have a 15, which is kind of based on an AC30. I have the one that we're playing through is called a tri-watt, which is like a high watt. And he actually compared it to the high watt DR103 that I used to own. So that's pretty cool, because it sounds a lot like what I had in a full-blown high watt. And then on the bottom I have like a JTM Marshall, and I also have like a little Tweed and all these cool things. So Steven's work, trinityamps.com, amazing stuff. And I used to record clips for him and stuff, so if you go and you look through the forums, you might see some of my stuff from when I used to geek out on speakers and all that kind of stuff. Anyway, moving on. So yeah, so this is an actual tube amp that we're playing through right now. Okay, so back to Universal Audio for a second. One of the cool things about the Apollo interfaces is that within the interface you can actually set up plugins to record through. So when you record stuff, you can actually record through the plugins, and that gets printed right into your file. Well, check this out. We can do this in Cubase as well. And I don't know if any of you have ever thought of doing this, but with things like drums and guitar, it's an especially cool thing to do, because it really works well. And again, our friends at Universal Audio are making some amazing things. So they have a bunch of different preamps. So like a Telefunken, and that's a Neve. And there's the API preamp. You can choose. For our example, I'm going to use API because, as you saw from my rack here, I'm kind of an API fan. I love that sound. So we'll use API again tonight. And I've also in the chain here put sort of like a console emulation. This is emulating, there's 3 different ones here. I think the one that we're using is a Neve, and I've got the drive up a little bit so we can get some saturation happening. And then I've also, just for fun, I've added the UAD Oxide plugin, which gives us sort of a tape emulation. And so I can do this on input, which is pretty fantastic. And so let's turn that on. Let's record again. We'll have Siobhan play a similar thing, and let's see if you can hear the difference between the one that has plugins on input and the one that doesn't. So I will mute again, and we will record this. Okay, now part of the reason that I open these plugins up for you is, remember when we were talking about level and -12 and all that kind of stuff? Well, here's a perfect example of why it's the correct level to record at. And I don't know if any of you noticed, but on the API preamp here, we've got a little meter. And the recording level for this is maybe a teeny bit quieter than it could have been. But if we record to -12 decibel full scale, like 2/3 of the way up, like we talked about at the beginning, guess where the level coming into this preamp is? It's right at 0, which is exactly where we want it to be. And then we can do things like add the saturation and turn up the input on the tape machine, and they actually are going to react more like the original pieces of gear than they would otherwise. So it's a perfect reason why we would want to do that. Okay, Let's have a listen to this. First things first, let's see how the phase is on this. And so let's listen to it, and we'll flip the phase on one channel and we'll see what happens. So. Okay, so I know right away from doing that, I don't even have to look at the waveform, that recording, those two microphones are in phase, because when I flip the phase on one of them, the sound completely disappears. Let's hear that again. Crazy. So the mic placement was good. That's a good thing. Now, just for fun, let's see if we can hear the difference between the two recordings. So this was the original recording that we did without plugins on input. So this is just straight in to the preamps on the AXR. Now, I'm not using the Silk, which is in here, which I would normally use, which makes everything sound better, but I just wanted things to be as clear and as clean and as unaffected as possible when we are doing that. So here is the recording without the plugins on input. Okay, and here is the plugin with, here is the recording with the plugins on input. Now, there is a slight difference in the performance. The non-plug-in recording is a little louder and has a little more energy, but I think it's pretty obvious when you listen to them that the top end has been softened, much in the same way that you would expect an analog recording to do that. So let me flip back and forth between them so you can hear the two side by side. So obviously this one, no plugins, plugins. Pretty cool. Definitely like a warmer, fatter kind of that smooths out the top end a little bit, which is pretty wonderful, and especially if you're recording anything that you like that sort of old sound, or you like a smoother sound, then it's something to play with. So plugins on input, not only for folks that use Apollo interfaces, which are amazing, and I'm not taking anything away from Apollo interfaces, but we can do it with a Steinberg interface by putting it into the input section here. All right, we're going to switch things up a little bit again, and we're going to come back with some kind of exciting technology things. So we're going to send you off. This one's short. The switchover will be fast, so we'll see you in a couple minutes.
One of the cool things about recording guitar these days is that you can split your signal into your amp and then one straight into your hardware. That way then you get a clean signal plus your, whatever you've recorded into your amp. The advantage is that you are able to then take that clean signal and reamp it or put it into some software plugins and play with the sound a bit more. And you know, if you need to do that, if you didn't like your sound that you recorded through the amp, you can go back and reamp it and really hone it and get it perfect. So when I'm recording, I like to split the signal into a clean take and also the amp take. I use a splitter. Basically, the signal is that the guitar goes in, there's two outputs, an isolated output which I've now sent to one of the channels in my DAW, and the standard output goes into you know, pedals or whatever goes eventually into the amplifier. That way then with the clean signal I can come back later and reamp it, which I have a reamping box to reamp later. So basically reamping the clean signal. I go out of the door into the input of this, and it allows then to get a line level to go straight back into the amplifier, and then I'll re-mic that amplifier. And the great thing about using a reamper is now I'm not worried about performance. I'm not worried about if I'm going to play something right. I can have that plugged in, and now I'll just spend time getting the right sound through my amp, because the performance is already in on the clean amp on your in your recording, and that'll just keep looping back, and you can tweak your amp, tweak your pedals, and go, okay, that's great. And then you hit record when you're happy with the sound that you've got.
That one might have been a little faster than we were ready for, but that's okay. We'll keep it going. I think we're gonna be okay here. We didn't actually get to do a sound check, but we'll work it out. Okay, so so many exciting things are happening in the world of guitar technology, and lucky for us, Yamaha is on the cutting edge of all of it. Yamaha not only has our own line of guitar products through Yamaha Guitar Group, like we have not only guitars, which we'll show you an electric in a minute, but THR amps, which are like legendary, groundbreaking, very cool little desktop amps. And what many of you might not know is that Yamaha also owns Line 6. So all of the Line 6 products, which many of you I'm sure have heard, are a Yamaha thing as well. And so we benefit from that technology as well. And so we've got a couple of these things to show you. And the way that we just recorded with mics on a cabinet and tube amps, that's how I've recorded most of the guitars that I've recorded in my life. And clearly I still have that stuff to use in my studio here, and I'm still very excited about it. However, I am coming around to the new way, because the flexibility that it offers, and frankly the tone now, is absolutely on par, and in some ways even extends what you can do tonally. And it's certainly a great way to work when you're working in Cubase. So, so what we have today is we have a THR 32, which is a modeled amp, and it doesn't have like a billion sounds like a lot of the other modeled amps have, but it has enough sounds, and it has effects built into it, and it kind of just works like an amp. Like, you know, I showed you the top there just so you could kind of see the controls that we have. It looks like a regular old-fashioned tube amp. So that's pretty exciting, because it doesn't take a whole lot of time to kind of figure out how to get the tones that you've known and loved for all these years. The other thing that's pretty cool about it is Line 6 makes this Relay G10T2, which is in the bottom of your corner. And it's a wireless, it's just that little transmitter piece. And you basically pop it into the pickup, into the jack thing in your guitar, and the THR just finds it. And so you're ready to go. It's pretty amazing. And boy, is it fast and convenient. So, so pretty excited about that. So I have one here right at my feet. I would show you, but there's so many cables, and I can't. So that's why I took the pretty pictures off the internet for you to see. Anyway, okay. Let's see what we've got going on. Do you want to play, Siobhan? Okay, it's working. Okay, so let's go back to Cubase and let's record this again. Let's keep checking out this plugin on input thing. Let's see what's going on with that. Now I've also got the DI in here, and we're going to get to that. Actually, before we record, let's talk about the DI, because maybe some of you don't really know what a DI does, or what's even the purpose of a DI. So I've got another graphic here. What a DI does is it takes our instrument and it makes it so that you can plug it in and it will work with a mic level. And most mixers and most sound cards, they have like mic inputs on the front. And but instruments, line level is generally a lot hotter. It's louder. And so what a DI does is it enables you to get that signal into a mixer or an interface at the right level. Now there's two ways we can do that. We can do that with an active DI, or we can do that with a passive DI. And I use and love both. And shout out to Radial, which was a company that started in Canada. And I did a bunch of testing of DIs, and I gotta tell you, to my ears, the Radial stuff sounds better than any of them. There's lots of great products out there, not to take anything away from any other manufacturers, but if you need a good DI, you see these on stages everywhere, you see them in studios everywhere, they're reliable and they sound great. So what's the difference between the J48 active DI box and the JDI passive? Well, active, as you would imagine, requires power. So you have to turn on phantom power if you have the active direct box. If you have the passive one, no power necessary. So if you're not sure about power, or you're not sure you're going to have power, you're on a desert island, I'd probably say you want the passive one, because it's going to work no matter where you are. In an active DI, you have a buffering circuit or an amplifier that change the levels so that it will go into the mic level properly. In a passive DI, it has a transformer that does that for you. But the transformer has sort of extra characteristics that are kind of nice. It sort of lends a toughness or a darkness to the tone, which is pretty cool. Active DIs are more sensitive to levels. So if you have a really loud instrument, like you have one of these newfangled basses with like crazy loud active pickups, you could overload the input of an active DI box. Well, you could overload the input of either type of DI box, but with an active one, when you overload it, it will distort, and it's not always the nicest sound. It's a distortion, as opposed to when you overload a passive DI, you get saturation. And we all have, in Cubase, we all have a number of saturation plugins that we love the sound of. So if you have a super duper hot instrument, I would go passive. So, you know, but if you have a really old vintage instrument that has really low output pickups, then that's really where the active DI will certainly shine. Active DIs tend to have a hotter output level and be a little brighter and cleaner sounding. Passive DIs, darker, warmer sound, but they're also much lower in input. Today we are using the passive DI, the JDI, exactly as you see here, and they're pretty easy to use. All you have to do, you plug your instrument in the input, and then the XLR on the other side of it goes into the interface, and I've got that going into input 3. I'll show you in a second. And then you can take another 1/4 inch out of the through, which is the thing on the left side there. You can see the through, and that goes into your tube amp or into your THR amp like we're going to use now, or maybe even to an unnamed amp, which is coming up shortly. So that's all there is to it, and you put it in line and you can record it that way. So pretty darn cool. Okay, Actually, let me show you. I'll show you where I have the... So, I've had the two mics have been going in 1 and 2 here on the interface, and this is my DI is going into number 3. And as you can see, when I go back to Cubase, you can see how it's set up here as well. So 1 and 2 are the two mics, or in the case of the THR, it's just left and right. And then we've got the DI in number 3. Okay, and since we're now in stereo, remember I didn't turn pan on when I linked them. Now I can unlink them, so that's pretty cool. Okay, I think we're ready to go. We've got the plugins on input off, and I think we should try recording this. Let's go back to the main screen, and we're ready to record. Okay, Siobhan, are you ready here? All right, here we go. Okay, I psyched you out a little bit there by going to the, I went to the mics on the amp. That's not what we're doing. We've got the THR happening. Okay, let's go back. Let's turn on the plugins, and let's record it again. And again, I'm using the API with that channel and then with the tape. Okay, here we go. Let's do it again. Okay, very cool. So, let's have a listen to what we recorded here. And maybe we can talk a little bit more about why that DI is, why that DI is super useful for us. Okay, so we have the two recordings. Let's have a listen to what's happening here. And by the way, the tremolo and the reverb, that's built into the amp. Like, that's all coming from there. I'm not adding anything. So that's what's happening right there. So that's pretty cool. Okay, let's hear it without the plugins on input again. Okay, and let's hear it with the plugins. Back to the other one. Here we go. And with the plugins. Very nice. It's as if we took some syrup or some high-fat cream and we poured it all over the sound, and it just got sort of smoother and creamier and amazing. So, so one other thing that's really super useful is that, you know, if we were going to use these amps over here, every time I want to change the sound or move the mic placement or whatever, I have to walk over to the amp and do stuff. But here's the beautiful thing about the THR is it's got an interface right on my computer, and I can adjust things here, and I can adjust the effects and everything. And so Siobhan is over there playing, the amp is at my feet. I don't even have to bend down. I can just adjust what's happening here. And the beautiful thing about the THR stuff is it also comes as an ASIO driver. So if you're a guitar player first, you can actually set up the THR as your interface, and you can play guitar through it, and it has two volume controls, one for the audio, which is the high fidelity sound coming up from Cubase, and one for the guitar, which sounds like a guitar amp. So it's a ridiculous piece of engineering that you can use it as an ASIO driver. It's about this big, and you can control the top panel from here. You can have sound come through that speaker. So you can sit on the couch with your laptop and you can hear your drum loop coming through the amp nice and clean, and it sounds like good speakers, and then you can hear your guitar stuff happening right along beside it. It's pretty awesome. Okay, we're going to spin you to one more video, and then we are going to get to the thing that I'm actually most excited about right now with playing guitar, and I think Derek may have already let the cat out of the bag, but we're going to talk about the Line 6 Helix. So here's a little intro.
As well as being perfect for live use, and I know that as I get older, not needing to carry a heavy amp around is a big bonus, the Line 6 Helix family are ideal for recording either in a large pro studio or a modest home studio. Now, you don't need to play loud, you can record authentic sounding HX guitar tones direct without waking up the whole street. And HX modeling is the technology that Line 6 used to accurately recreate the sound and feel of classic guitar and studio gear. And this process even involves modeling the individual components that affect the sound in those classic pieces of gear. And it's gear that we all wish we could afford, but even if we could afford to own them, they aren't always that easy to find or to keep in reliable working order. So having authentic sounding versions of those classic and iconic setups at your fingertips not only saves you a lot of money, but also saves a lot of time setting them up. And time is very important when creativity is flowing. All of the Helix family come packed with over 60 HX guitar and bass amps and over 100 effects. Now, if you add to that 37 HX cabinet models complete with 16 microphone types and mic placement options, and you're sure to find the right sound for any session. Helix LT, floor and rack offer multiple ways of getting your sounds into your DAW or even to tape. Now, the obvious way would be to use one of the many analog outputs. Now, all Helix hardware has the option of either quarter-inch or XLR outputs, but if you prefer to stay digital, you could offer the SP diff outs on the floor and the rack, or use the AES EBU digital connection found in all three products. And all members of the Helix family will work at sample rates up to 96K. So let's quickly record a bass track, and for this I'm just going to plug straight into my interface using the quarter-inch output. And I'm going to use the SV Beast bass amp model into an 8x10 cab with a 47 condenser mic, and I'm also going to add some octave pitch effects. Now for this next guitar part, I'm going to record in a slightly different way. So like many of the Line 6 products, you also have the option of using Helix as a USB computer interface. This means I'm now streaming the Helix audio to and from my recording software via the USB cable. I'll also now be monitoring back the audio from the Helix output. Now this also means that I can reamp my guitar tones. Now that means I can record dry guitar sounds straight from the guitar strings with no processing. I can then change amps and effect settings after I've recorded my part. And I'm still going to be listening to and playing to a full Helix tone, I'm just not having to commit to that sound just yet. And I can still record the sound I'm listening to alongside this dry part. This way it's just going to give me options and a get out of jail card if I realise later that I've not chosen the ideal guitar sound, but it does require a little bit of setting up. Inside Helix, you'll see that the reamp channel in the global settings page is set to USB channel 7. I'm going to set Cubase to record the audio from USB channel 7 and also play back to USB channel 7. When I plug the guitar into Helix, I'll still hear my preset, in this case a J45, through my main outputs, but Cubase will just be recording the sounds of the strings. When I finish the take, its output will play to USB channel 7. Set the Helix preset's input to USB channel 7, and the sound of my strings are now played back through the Helix preset. Now I can tweak my preset whilst listening to my actual performance in the track. I'm not committed to a particular amp or effect until the final mix. And when I've decided on my preset, I just record the sound from the Helix back onto an audio track, in this case from USB 1 and 2. As you can see, there are lots of possibilities for recording Helix hardware by using analog outs, digital outs or reamping, and that brings us nicely to Helix Native. So Helix Native lets you record all of these great HX amp and effect sounds, but all in the box. You just add it as an insert on your audio track. Now it's just like the reamping that we just talked about, but the audio is never going to leave your Mac or your PC. And you can use multiple instances of Helix Native, and it isn't just limited to guitar and bass. You could try using Helix Native studio quality effects to process keyboards, synths, drums, drum loops, vocals, or anything else. You just need to make sure that the input gain isn't too hot. Native will act like a real amp and become more overdriven the more signal you send it. Check out the Helix Native overview video for more information, and Line 6 have got some great deals on native if you audio on Helix hardware, or if you just want to try a free, fully functional 15-day trial so you can play along with these great HX amp models yourself, if you head over to line6.com/Helix. So there's lots of great options for recording your tracks that just weren't around in the old days, so don't waste this opportunity to get recording, and thank you very much for watching.
Okay, so back in the day I owned some Pod XTs and I thought they were fine when I was doing a demo. They were great for that. I used them when I was recording a band live off the floor and we didn't want to have the amps live in the room, so bleeding into the drum mics. They were great for that because it allowed the guitar player to hear some sort of a tone that they could dial in without bleed in the room. So they were great for that. But I would not commit to the Pod XT for a track on a recording that was going to be released. I shouldn't say wouldn't. Occasionally I would when I could come up with something really cool. But I just found that they didn't have the same size as putting mics on a cabinet with a tube amp. And I was always looking for the biggest guitar tone I could get. And I just couldn't get that out of the Pod XT. As wonderful as a product it was for the time. It's all changed. The Helix is ridiculous. And it's ridiculous for a whole bunch of reasons. A few were outlined there, but I just want to say in my world, it's ridiculous because there's a plug-in. So I can use the plug-in in my session natively in here. Right now I have a pedal board here, but not only is it a pedal board that allows me to dial in exactly in the pedal board what I can dial in with the plug-in, but I can also do it on screen with the same sort of interface. So here's the line 6 to use with the Helix floor. This is the software that is adjusting what's on the floor. And here's the plugin. It's the same thing. So the great thing about this is that I basically have it everywhere. Like I can have it in the world of real guitars. I can have it in my Cubase world. It works anywhere, on stage, in the studio. That my tone with the Helix travels everywhere I go. It's amazing. And it no longer struggles to compete sound-wise with tube amps. I think this thing sounds every bit as good as most well-recorded tube amps. I think it's amazing, and the flexibility blows away any tube amp that I can ever have. Why didn't you sell your tube amps, Brent? Well, there's still a place for that, and it's a wonderful sound, and I will still use that. But whereas I think I would use my tube amps probably 99% of the time, I think I might use my tube amps maybe 35% of the time, 30% of the time, Helix the rest of the time. I just did a session recording with this gentleman. I won't name names because the tune is not out yet, but maybe we'll get there. I just did a session with someone in my after hours session producer life, and we recorded the guitars and vocals because it's a pandemic we're in, using VST Connect. He was at his house and I was here in my studio, and we record everything over the internet. He used a pod on his end to monitor his guitar sounds and sent me a clean signal over the internet. And I used the native plugin on the track for all the guitars, and they sound huge. They sound fantastic. So an internet recording with plug-in amps for a guy who recorded tube amps for his entire life until recently. Anyway, I'm pretty blown away by this stuff, and I think it's super duper cool. Siobhan is also playing something that I think is super duper cool. This Yamaha Revstar, and Yamaha Music got together with Yamaha Motors, the motorcycle people, when they were designing these guitars, and they were trying to come up with kind of a look that would sort of have the cool factor of the motorcycles, but have the playability and all the features we love in the guitar. So the Revstar line was the end result of this. They all look totally gorgeous like that. For those of you that have seen any of my conversations with Devin Lougheed, he has a couple of them and he's loving them. They're his go-to guitars now, and they are a beautiful thing. So Siobhan has one in her hand. You want to show that one for the camera, Siobhan? Isn't that? Oh, what a beautiful, beautiful guitar. It's pretty fantastic. So pretty excited to be recording that guitar through the Helix. So let's come back here. I know this has been a long one. Before I go any further, Tony asked, he wants to know the chain for everything. So here's what it is, Tony. It's as simple as could possibly be. It is a guitar plugged into an amp device of some sort. We've had 3 different ones. The tube amp, the THR-30 below me, the Helix below me, which you haven't heard yet, but it's coming. So guitar from cable into DI box into input 3 right here, and then through the DI box into amp thing, tube amp, THR, Helix. And then if it's analog, we've got mics on it, and the mics go into 1 and 2 over here, straight in. Or in the case of the THR and the Helix, they're just line out straight in to 1 and 2 here. I could use my APIs and all that kind of stuff, and if I was making a record right now, I probably would. But for the sake of this, we just made it really simple. Now, I could go in and I could adjust the level on the front panel here if I wanted to. I could do it with knobs on the interface itself. But the beauty of what's happening with the integration with the Steinberg interface and Cubase and all that is I just plugged it in, and then I'm doing all of my level controlling right from in here in the inspector. So here's my level right here. And if I need phantom, I turn it on here. I can pad the input. I can flip the phase here. I've got a phase thing. What I'm doing is I'm rolling off, I've got a high pass here, so I'm rolling off some bass. And I can even turn on my silk control here, which, why don't we do that? My favorite is blue, set to 7. So now I've got silk and the gains are set all here. That's it. That's all my level setting is. That's it. That's all that there is. I haven't done, there's no other anything, no trickery happening here. And then I hit record and we go straight in. So that's all there is to it. So pretty awesome and pretty straightforward. Let's record this, and we won't waste time because I think we like with the plugins on input. So let's just record with the plugins on input. Are you ready, Siobhan? You ready for us here? All right. Okay, so let's set record. Let's record the DI, and why don't we record something here? Okay. Cool. All right. So there it is playing back for us. Now, we don't have to worry about phase because it's not two separate mics. It's just the stereo output from here. But here's the thing. Let's have a listen to just the DI on its own. And this is that dreaded direct sound that, all the guitar players look at me sideways when I put a DI in their signal, because it sounds like this. Not so good. But let's say I'm recording a song and I've set up this tone in the Helix here, and this is my part. And I think to myself, the day that I recorded that, I liked that tone, but now that I've added some keyboard parts and I've got some other things in the mix, I don't think I really like that tone anymore. Well, here's one instance where having the DI really helps, because I can take this DI, which doesn't sound very good, and guess what? I can add the Helix plugin to it. And now I've got a perfectly in sync recording, and it's as if I have complete and utter control over my amp tone that was already recorded. So I can essentially choose and play with the tone in the context of the mix and get something completely different. So here's what it sounds like with the Helix plugin put on my DI track. And I can change the sounds at will. These are just presets that are built in. And I can skim through. I can skim through. Now, here's the other thing I can do. And again, because I recorded them at the same time, they're perfectly in sync and everything is good. I can actually mix and match between my original tone with this new DI tone. And I can turn it up and down, or I can decide I want less. I can try different amps. I have all kinds of options, and I think I was blowing you up a little bit there. I'm sorry if it was too loud. I'm excited right now. But having the DI gives me all kinds of options. And not only in the digital world. In one of the other videos you saw, they were reamping, which is essentially taking a clean signal, taking it out of the computer and running it through a tube amp and miking that and bringing it back in. Well, our friends at Radial, and here's a shout out to Shu. Hey Shu, this is called an X amp. This is my reamper that I used to use in the old days, before I had this technology to do this. So I was able to reamp through a tube amp if I had our DI recording, and I used it a bunch of times, and it was amazing. Because, you know, a lot of times you record a tone and you think it's the tone you want, and then the tune changes while you work on it, and you want to go back but you don't want to play it again. And this way you don't have to play it again because your performance was amazing. So you're all good. So that's one of the reasons why you might want a DI. Here's another one. And for any of us that have ever tried to edit really distorted guitars, they can be quite challenging visually because the waveforms can be a lot fuzzier. Now, on the thing that Siobhan just played here, you know, it's pretty obvious where, it's pretty obvious where the beginning and ends are of everything. So this is pretty easy to chop up. But if you've ever tried to edit like a really heavy distorted guitar, the waveform is just like, and the beautiful thing about having the DI is that the attacks and everything are always very, very clean. So for editing purposes, link the 3 tracks, link your recorded amp and your DI tracks, and when you're editing, especially visually, use the DI for the edit because the attacks are very clear. And then even if you can't see the attacks in a very distorted track or waveform that's just full of effects or full of saturation or whatever it may be, you'll still be able to edit a tight part using the DI track. So that's the other main reason why I like to record DIs. So all the guitar players are my friend. By the end of the session, they're my friends again, and they understand it because they have these really great tight tracks, and we were able to reamp any of the tones that they didn't like in the first place. So I wonder if there are any other questions. Looks like Derek is super excited. I think I've kept you guys for a super long time, but I hope that this one was a little different than all the interviews we've been having lately, and I hope that some of this was useful to you. I think that's probably it for tonight. I hope that you will join us on July 8th, and I promise even if you don't have a Montage or a ModiX keyboard, there will be some concepts happening between Cubase and the keyboard that will apply to whatever keyboard you may or may not have at home, or even software samplers and things like that as well. So I hope you'll join us on Thursday, July 8th, and I hope you will join us next month when we come back for part 2 of Steinberg Sessions, front end, recording, input. Have a great Thursday. Thanks for hanging in. We'll see you next month.